Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Social Work Week 2025, and welcome to this event, Change the Script, How Can We Reframe Social Work? I am Iona Roberts. I am one of the regional engagement leads at Social Work England, and we are really pleased to see you joining us today. I'm also mindful how beautiful it is outside today, therefore we really appreciate that you are able to be part of this session. We have a legal disclaimer. This particularly refers to our external speakers, and unfortunately, one of the speakers has been unable to join this afternoon. Therefore, I'm going to ask my colleague to move to the next slide, please. With no further ado, I'm going now to hand over to our Assistant Director, Katie Florence. Katie is our Assistant Director for Communication, Engagement and Insight. Katie.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. I think I've now got control of the slides, have I? Can I just check that? Thank you, brilliant. So good afternoon, everyone. Really, thank you for attending this session where we're looking at reframing the social work profession and the narrative that surrounds social work. Something that all of us, I think, feel quite passionate about. And thank you for attending the last session of the day. I realise we've got that last slot of the day, which is sometimes not the best one, but appreciate you all attending. As Joanna said, I'm Katie. I'm one of the assistant directors at Social Work England. I'm mainly responsible for communications, engagement and insight. I'm joined by Jonathan, who is head of communications, and Georgia, who is still sadly sick, so cannot attend this session today. But Georgia is from Kindred, which is a marketing agency that's been working really closely with us to help develop Change the Script, which many of you may have seen. Next slide, please, Jack. Thank you. A bit of a look ahead of what we're going to cover. We're going to look at the background of Change the Script campaign, so indeed take you a little bit behind the scenes, but also more broadly look back at the history of social work campaigns. Some interesting insights for us there. We're going to have a quick trot through some of the phase 1 learning. Jonathan is going to walk us through that. You'll then come back to me to look at phase 2, some really exciting developments, literally quite hot off the press as we speak. There's a team filming campaign activity in Birmingham today, which is wonderful. And then, as Joanna has said at the beginning, there's an opportunity for really to get your participation and engagement as well, which will be lovely via the Mentimeter. So we'll keep you updated with the login details for that so that you can enter the code in good time. Next slide, please, Jack. And the next one. Thank you. But before we begin, I just wanted to really underline, I suppose, the role of communications, engagement and research. As you will have noticed from our job titles, we are not social workers, but we work incredibly closely with social workers through mechanisms like our National Advisory Forum, through our communications and engagement work. We're in contact with them a lot, and also through the social workers that are indeed employed by Social Work England as well. Collectively, the people you've seen have, we actually worked out we have about 50 years experience, which is slightly terrifying, of comms, engagement and marketing, and we're incredibly passionate about what we do. I suppose what I wanted to point out in this slide is quite often the requests we have are for campaigns and activities and let's do lots of stuff. And I think anyone that knows me and Jonathan will testify that what we're actually concerned with is what's the problem that we're trying to solve through communications and marketing. Can it actually be achieved by communications alone, which we will touch on throughout this presentation, and how will we know if we have been successful? What impact will the communications have on individuals? Got a quick definition there as well of marketing campaigns, not trying to go too basic for people, but not assuming that people have this knowledge either. And just wanting to point out there some of the keywords within that, which is research into behaviours, thinking about how we're strategic within our planning. So not simply doing a lot of stuff, but doing more of the right stuff and targeting things. Working with partners, which I think again will come through strongly in this presentation, and how we use data and insight to shift attitudes and behaviours. That's at the root of a lot of good communications and and campaigns activity. Next slide, please, Jack. But before we begin, I just wanted to take a little bit of a step back. People internally will be tired of me talking about this campaign because it was a former employer of mine. But I suppose what I wanted to highlight in this slide is that this idea of a brand social work, it's not a new phenomenon. It's something that's been wrestled with as long as the profession has been the profession. In all of its diversity, and you know, what does professional identity look like? How do you reflect and portray social work in all its facets? And that's challenging. But this slide in particular points out a 2009 campaign where potential children's social workers were invited to be the difference. Some of you may remember this. It was a national recruitment campaign that was launched to highlight how practitioners use everyday objects to assess young people's needs and to improve their lives. And it was led by the then Children's Social Work Development Council, also known as CWDC, but it was government funded, it was high profile. It saw a 6-week burst of campaign activity that included national advertising on billboards and on TV, with much success in terms of conversion rates into the profession. And this, what you can see here, is some of the storyboarding of that original campaign, many of which is still sort of relevant today. You'll look, if you look closely as well, you'll see Goldie, the actor and musician extraordinaire, is also featured as a care experience person. So very, very high profile, a lot of weight behind it. And since then, there have been many interventions to try and continue to address inaccuracies about social work, particularly locally, but as well as national schemes to think about how you get graduates and particular niches of the profession in, and indeed how to encourage career changes and different elements of the problem that we've been trying to solve. Many of you may have noted as well the Department for Health and Social Care's national campaign on care, particularly during COVID, but also Live Right Now, and trying to attract the right candidates for care worker roles. And unfortunately, social workers aren't profiled within that activity itself. So to my knowledge, nothing quite on the scale of this campaign, which was some 16 years ago, and certainly not something that speaks to the diversity of the profession across children's, adults and families. But what I would say is that doesn't mean that there hasn't been pockets of incredible activity to try and create and sustain a more consistent narrative. And just to name check a few, Frontline have done This Is the Work some 3 years ago to tackle head on some of the myths, again, just about graduate recruitment, but actually some of the work that went into that. Community Care with Choose Social Work, thinking particularly about building morale within the profession and how we show social workers as dedicated, hardworking people who are improving people's lives. SWU have met with Ofcom to highlight that journalists must adhere to standards in their coverage of social work practice and the stories that they cover there. So thinking of that ask there was to ask members to report anything that falls short of that. So pressure from that point of view from the unions as well. And Unison have continued to campaign on the important role social workers play in society, asking particularly government to highlight and celebrate it more. You may have seen this week during Social Work Week that Minister Dabby for Children and Families did a heartfelt thanks, as did the chief social workers. So continuing to press for that recognition as well at the top. And BASWA, of course, have their journalism awards scheme that recognises high quality reporting of social work in the media to influence change. And alongside this, I note and have particularly noted across Social Work Week numerous bespoke activities undertaken by councils ranging from Portsmouth to Wakefield, and many of them are using the week to highlight the good work that is happening there as well. So it's really important to recognise that and celebrate that alongside any sort of national initiatives as well. Thank you, Jack. And before we became the regulator in 2018, we wanted to really understand this sentiment about within the system that we were going to be asked to operate. This slide shows some of that sentiment. I would like to think that we've moved on a little from some of this, but you will know more than me if that's actually the case. There's some themes here around perception and media coverage at a time from, and particularly this was also surveyed people with lived experience, but the one in the centre is particularly eye-catching to me. Because I think quite often we're asked, why are we involved in this as the regulator? You regulator, so why are you concerned with the image? And is that more for membership organisations? And while we are not a membership organisation, and we're not in the space of lobbying government in terms of our remit as a regulator, we do exist to promote confidence in social work to the public. And this particular quote here about misrepresentation feels really apt and potentially the barrier to us achieving that. So it's really important that we're in this space as well. I was reflecting just this week actually that I was watching Adolescence on Netflix, as I'm sure many of you will have been. It's impossible not to. Just the brilliance of that show. I don't know if you caught it, but in episode 2 there was a real fleeting mention of social work, and it was mentioned in relation to a serious incident at the school. And I may not get this quote exactly right, but it was words to the effect of, we're going to be overrun with social workers now. So and in that same episode, there was a conversation with teachers, and where someone was talking very negatively about teachers. And that was quite robustly refuted, as not all teachers are like that. So I just thought that was interesting in terms of just that interplay between how perhaps we just use throwaway fleeting connotations of professions in general, actually, and what impact that might have on individuals trying to do a good job. Also noting that just not everyone will have a social worker in their life as a result of those connotations as well. So what's the reference point for that for the public? And ultimately that matters. If people don't trust social workers, they might avoid those services. So really important to just really focus in on how we build relationships. And for us as the regulator, that also helps with the messaging that we must get across around our mission to enable positive change, and also show that social work is highly educated, highly skilled, and works to professional standards to keep people safe. Next slide, please. And just before we move on to Jonathan, I thought it'd be useful to talk about the more recent research that we've done. You may have seen this as well, and it's available on our website through YouGov, who we commissioned this research. We were thinking about how to promote social work as a rewarding profession, and we were asked specifically to look at this by the Department for Education with a little pot of some ring fence funding, which wouldn't get us to the advertising heights of that first campaign I mentioned, but we really wanted to look at where we focus our efforts for greatest impact. And so we started, as that original slide said, with research to look at both public and professional views. And although some stereotypes persist, there were quite mixed findings and quite interesting nuances to this research, which are important to note as well. And I think what's interesting is that although understanding amongst the public and healthcare workers is quite skewed towards children's social work, people were in the main quite overwhelmingly sympathetic to social workers and their professional aims. The 44% you can see here is really considering about perceived respect within society. So why is it that there is still this this lag perhaps with how individuals perceive that social work is valued within society? Because indeed 3/4 of people thought that social workers wanted the best for people, and 62% said that social workers make a big difference in people's lives. So there's some really interesting interplays between these statistics and what is it that tells us. Also interesting in terms of just perceptions from within the profession as well, and really trying to make sure that, as well as our work to share the accuracy, an accurate portrayal of the profession with the public, that we're doing that inwardly from within the profession as well. Because actually 83% of people, of social workers, were proud to tell others about their job, but only 16% would recommend that job to other people. Next slide, please, Jack. So we know that a profession being valued by society there's much more going on there, isn't there? A campaign alone is not going to necessarily solve that. There are numerous factors at play within the profession: feeling valued, pay, funding, working conditions, and potentially even coverage of serious incidents and what happens when those incidents happen. But nevertheless, we started to think that there was something really interesting about these findings, and our hypothesis was that what we really need is an always-on narrative to start to fill the void we have when the negative connotations arise, just as is the case with many professions. And so that building up of trust feels quite important, so that we've got a more level playing field when negative perceptions, as they will in any profession, arise, and negative stories. And we felt that having the opportunity to do that shouldn't be wasted. So we really went all in thinking about this. How could we work to co-produce this campaign? And I won't steal Jonathan's thunder. But there's multiple spin-offs to getting that right, we felt. And so we set about pitching the merits of this campaign to inform and educate people on the vital role that social workers play to secure what I have to say was quite modest funding from the government, but to really test and pilot what is it that we can do in this space, and how can we shift some of those perceptions. Next slide, please, Jack. So in summary, I will very quickly trot through these generalizations, it has to be said, because as I've said, there's some quite nuanced, it's quite a nuanced picture in the research. But in general, just to pick a few out, understanding of social work centres around supporting children, that's generally quite a public image of the profession. People think that it isn't necessarily respected as a profession within society, but do hold personal views, and that includes people with lived experience, which feels quite important. Next slide, Jack. How is social work represented? As we've just mentioned there, negative news is often perceived as getting more focus than the positive. And indeed, people think it can be more negatively portrayed as a result of that. Child protection, again, can dominate coverage. I think that's for obvious reasons. And there's an interesting one in point 4, actually, around its association with potentially social work only being associated with supporting people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. And actually, a really interesting chat we had a recent stakeholder group to develop the campaign was really dispelling some of those myths, which was really interesting to dig into a little bit as well, and that any of us actually could need social work in our lives at any time from cradle to grave. Next slide, please, Jack. And so all of this, what does this culminate into? And you know, where might a campaign add value? I suppose is where we came to with our conclusions. I won't necessarily run through all of them or labour the point, but you know, there is relationships with low morale, there is relationships with recruitment and retention challenges for sure. And while this campaign is not specific to recruitment and retention, to achieving a national recruitment and retention campaign, we really hope that it will pave the way for some of those considerations on a national scale. And then finally, yeah, just that feeling that more needs to be done to share the success, in particular can convey the highly skilled work that social workers do to standards. That's it from me. I am going to hand over to Jonathan.
Thanks, Katie. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. I'll just reintroduce myself quickly. So I'm Jonathan. I'm head of comms at Social Work England. Been with the organisation for 5 years now. So as Katie pointed out previously, I'm not a social worker, but I've been here for quite a while now and I've really got to know the profession, both by working with social workers within the organisation, meeting lots of people outside, and I have had a little bit of lived experience of social work in terms of kind of with my family in recent years, unfortunately, when my grandmother moved into a care home, so kind of seen it firsthand as well. Just want to apologise in advance that I am carrying a bit of a cough at the minute, so please do excuse me if I'm not quick enough to jump to the mute button. So yeah, in this part of the session, to build on the why that Kate has spoken about, I'm going to talk a little bit about the what, particularly focused on the first phase of the campaign, which was launched 12 months ago today, though it does sort of feel like yesterday. Before I get into the detail, what I'd like to do quickly is just play the video that we published as part of phase one. I'm hoping many of you will have seen this video and engaged with the campaign last year, and thanks to those of you that did, but if not, it's available on our website and on our YouTube channel afterwards if you want to watch it back. I also want to highlight that this film features real people, so these are not actors just simply wouldn't do it justice. So this video tells the real story of social work from the perspective of Callum and Joel, who have been supported in the past by social workers Sonia and Sharon. So if you're okay to play the video, Jack.
Back when I was with child protection, my life was really intense. I was having lots of family issues at home and issues with education.
My mum was in the hospice. I felt like I had a straitjacket on like 24/7. I knew I had to be strong, you know. But deep down inside, I'm being torn apart.
I met Sonia when I went into care. A lot of people think social workers are going to swoop in and make choices for you, but actually it was more being empowered and to do things for myself.
Sharon was one of the social workers there. She knew what I was thinking before I even thought it. As opposed to like your traditional counsellor, she gives me prompts, she helps me with resolutions, she helps me to move forward day by day.
Social work is very much led by you. They're there to empower what you want.
I think after that first session I was like, I need this, 100%. If I'm being brutally honest, like, Sharon saved my life, you know? She listens, she understands, make me feel that everything's going to be alright, because the only other person that did that was my mum.
At first, I had the big impression that social workers were here to come take me away from my mum. But actually, it's like, you know when you're running a race and there's someone waiting for you at the finish line? Sonia is that person at the end of the track.
Sharon changed my life, and I will be eternally grateful forever.
So yeah, really impactful video. I can see all the love hearts and the thumbs up and claps popping up on screen now. So I'm glad you all liked it. Like I say, that's available on our YouTube channel. We'll refer to actually another video that Katie mentioned previously that we're producing at the minute for the second phase of the campaign as we get a little bit further along. So on this slide, that you say, we just want to kind of talk through kind of how we look to encourage a public-facing dialogue on the role that social work plays within society. So through the campaign, we wanted to bring Social Work Week to a new audience, and that's alongside our already established engagement with the sector and the social work profession itself. So Social Work Week was our real opportunity to use that national moment as a key hook. So Change the Script launched back in March 2024 with the aim of promoting confidence in social work by informing and educating the public on the reality of what social workers do. And that's promoting social work as a highly skilled, highly educated, regulated profession. Co-production is something Katie touched on earlier, and it's one of our guiding principles at Social Work England, and that's about giving people who are affected by our work the opportunity to participate in and influence our work. So alongside Kindred, the agency that we worked on this campaign with, we initiated a working group which had a range of diverse people with lived and learned experience of social work to help co-produce the campaign. And through those conversations, many workshops, planning, discussions, 3 key strands were clear in the approach that we want to take to this campaign. The first being that the campaign must tell an impactful story. So we leveraged the research which Katie introduced to create a conversational hook and ask the entertainment industry to change the script. Secondly, we must use credible and relatable voices, such as those in the story that you've just watched now, to tell the real story of social work. This will be through those case studies with social workers and those with lived experience. And then thirdly, we needed some compelling assets. So through planning, we decided and created assets which included the earlier video, media releases, a range of social media assets which included little snippets from the video, and a toolkit to engage the support of our stakeholders. Next slide, please. So a key focus of the campaign was media relations activity, which we recognised was a key channel for us to reach the public. Through conversations with many different media outlets and journalists in the weeks leading up to Social Work Week, through Social Work Week and after Social Work Week, it showed that despite negative references to social work in the media, there's a definite appetite from those journalists to run the positive stories too. Those conversations confirmed that many of them hadn't considered the damaging impact that misinformed storylines in film and TV could have on the industry and those it seeks to support. So that was a real important conversation starter for us in those chats. So we kickstart the media activity to coincide with Social Work Week, but it did continue throughout the week and for several months beyond, because there was such an interest from the media to do something on this, but obviously some had longer lead times to get those articles live. So while initially the majority of the coverage we saw was during Social Work Week, it did go beyond that. And alongside members of our leadership team talking about the campaign, we had social workers and people with lived experience share their stories to shine a light on the need to change the script and re-educate the public around their misconceptions. As you'll see there on screen, in total for the first phase of the campaign, we saw over 40 pieces of media coverage on Change the Script, every single one of them positive. And it equaled a potential audience of 53 million people. That's 53 million people, that many of whom will have an interaction with social work, but also many who won't have. So this may have been their first real feel of what social work is and what social workers do. Next slide, please. Here's just a flavour of some of the media outlets that ran that positive coverage. That includes national radio, such as BBC Radio 4 Women's Hour, 5 Live and Capital FM. A wide range of regional radio stations were particularly interested, lots of the BBC local stations, but also a number of independent stations as well. Some national titles that you'll recognise on there: The Metro, The Big Issue, and a PR Week, which is one for us in comms. And our sector press fully supported the campaign as well, and there was coverage in the likes of Community Care and Children and Young People Now. Next slide, please. Now, I think Katie touched on this again earlier in terms of kind of the other activity that takes place across the profession, and we know that we can't change the script alone. And all that complementary activity is looking to raise the profile of social work. So it was important for us to engage stakeholders in the campaign and provide some tools and messages for them through a toolkit that would enable them to support Change the Script. So our toolkit included a range of resources, including key messages, visual assets for social media, and recommended copy that they could utilise in their newsletters, their websites, social media, and so on. There's a few examples on screen there, as we saw stakeholders across the profession really engaging with the campaign and supporting the campaign. Endorsements, amplification, and that included a range of government departments such as the Department for Education and Department of Health and Social Care, but also some other government departments such as the Ministry of Justice. Other sector leaders such as chief social workers and social work employers. And we saw many social workers promoting the campaign as well across their own social media channels. Stakeholder involvement is increasingly important as well in phase 2 of the campaign, and we'll touch on that shortly. Next slide, please. And this is my final slide before I hand back to Katie, but a really important one, I think, in terms of kind of not just what we did, but the evidence that this has got legs to go beyond this initial pilot phase. So what we wanted to do, as well as informing and educating the public on the purpose of social work, as a pilot, we wanted to better understand how this type of campaign could change perceptions longer term. So to help us to understand that behavioural shift and how the campaign might change perceptions of social work, we produced a short public survey, which was produced for a sample of people, a little bit like the YouGov ones, if you've ever completed them, that was classed as a representation of the general population, with a confidence interval of 95%. The survey asked people to respond to a number of statements they felt best described social workers, and they were asked these both before and after viewing the video that we shared with you 5 minutes ago. As you see on screen there, the results show significant increases in positive references on social work and social workers. I'll pull a few out now. So after viewing the video and answering the questions again, we saw a 75% increase in people selecting that social workers improve people's lives, a 247% increase in people selecting that social workers empower people, a 67% increase in people strongly agreeing that social workers deserve more recognition, and a 61% decrease in people selecting social workers remove children from families, which is challenging those negative TV stereotypes that we often see. These are, as I'm sure you'll agree, some quite significant shifts in perception, which really highlights the power of an alternative narrative and positive content in shifting public confidence. I'll pass back to Katie now, who's going to talk a little bit more about our plans for phase 2 of the campaign, which are now well underway, as well as your opportunity to influence it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Perfect, Jack. Thanks. We can go to this slide. So an incredible amount of work to build on there in a short space of time, really leveraging all of the tools, the contacts, the stakeholders, the co-production, everything that we've got at our disposal to get that burst of activity off the ground. But obviously, we now need to sustain that. I think even the campaign I mentioned right at the start in 2009 is interesting, isn't it? Because it was really impactful, but it was a 6-week burst of activity. Which is a relatively short space of time. So coming back to this idea that we want this always on narrative, how do we collectively begin to sustain that? And we'll look at some of the ideas that we've got, and indeed there'll be opportunity for you to feed into that as well shortly. But obviously we want to do more of this. Like, this feels relevant. This feels like it is making an impact, as Jonathan has just shown there. There is something in this that is resonating with people and indeed shifting that dial on longer term behaviour change as well. We've mentioned previously that there's multiple spin-offs to this that would be really welcome, and in particular just considering recruitment and retention. What learning can we take from it? How do we pave the way, and how do we pass that learning on through sessions like this to local areas as well? Next slide, Jack. So just bringing us back to that why, and never wanting to assume that the why is the same as the first phase. In this second burst of activity, we're also alongside, yes, this is very nice in fulfilling our statutory duty, but also we're quite mindful that with a new government, it also has to support their agenda, and there are indeed very specific ways in which we believe this campaign also does that. So particularly for the Department for Education, thinking about breaking down barriers to opportunity, keeping children safe. Social work is vital within that. And also supporting government on adult social care and giving people, in their words, the best possible care in the most appropriate place. And how can this campaign help support some of that as well? As we've mentioned throughout, I think the collaboration has come across, and actually working together, as Jonathan says, we can't change the script in isolation, and nor would we ever want to do that or impose that. So we're thinking about those aspects of people's stakeholder activity that's out there, that's already existing. And again, at the end, I'll mention this again, but thinking about how we can continually create this consistent language and this sense of what does social work as a profession look like, feel like, and impact on the people who, when they need it in their life. Next slide, please, Jack. So in phase 2, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is a very live situation, and we were hopeful that we'd have been able to bring you some of the stills that we've just received before we came on to do this session, and we'd have loved to have quickly got them in, but we didn't have a chance. Of the filming that's taking place for a handful of new films to show social work and continue to show social work in a different light. We are really thinking about what were the strongest assets in phase 1. Again, making sure this isn't just a 6-week burst of activity that happens and then goes away. How can we continue to amplify those stories? And how do we bring that real sense of understanding of what is it that media are looking for, as well, as Jonathan says, leveraging some of that. Indeed, they're not just looking for the negative, they are looking for the positive. So credibility, relatability, and media appeal to reach the public as well. Next slide, please, Jack. So real stories of social work is the thread that feeds through this, and what we're concerned with here. We are very fortunate to have secured an author, Beth Moran, who, as I say, is out there as right now filming. She is a person with lived experience of social work. She's also a foster carer, but she's going to act as our storyteller throughout this new campaign that will be coming shortly at the end of April. So do watch out for that. And just really gathering diverse reflections from social work in all its many facets, and thinking about how do we tell the story, not even necessarily from the point of view of the profession, but as you show with Joel and Callum's story, from the people who have lived experience. That feels really important, and perhaps slightly new in some regard. So keen to keep that as well happening as a bit of a thread that weaves through it, that it's very much told from the person with lived experience to share the uniqueness of the stories that they have as well on the profession. Next slide, Jack. As we've mentioned, part of this next phase, we and something we actually wanted to do in phase 1 is to really think about reframing and using this concept of reframing to really drive home a bit of a consistent language for social work, a set of key messages and narrative that we will all start to get behind and shape in our interactions with people. We have worked with stakeholders in this, and we've worked with our National Advisory Forum as well. There's ongoing work that's happening as a part of that to really get under the skin of what does this look like. We've seen this done successfully for areas like homelessness with Crisis, the charity, for example, and what is it that we can give back to the profession to support them on this mission to create a bit more of a consistent narrative that really reflects the heart of what social work does and what it achieves for society. We have undertaken consumer research, as it notes here, with the general public, asking people about the words they'd best use to describe social work, and these findings will form part of this, together with the work that we're doing with the profession to consider and again we'll do this in our next slot, but just thinking about what is it that's resonating with people, how is that shifted over time from that 2018 survey that we conducted coming new into this sector. And again, thinking about how we collaborate with stakeholders. So we've got agreement from BASWA, SWU, Unison, Local Government Association, the PSW Network, our National Advisory Forum, and members of our Education and Training Advisory Forum as well, to really help us to shape this. And we'll be interested in your thoughts as well shortly. In fact, now, Joanna, would you help us lead into the reframing guide? And this is your opportunity to just really have a bit of participation in what this guide will look like. Oh, you're on mute, Joanna. It was going to happen to one of us.
Absolutely. This is fourth day of Social Work Week. I was thinking I'm going to escape from being on mute, but there you are,
Absolutely.
Thursday afternoon. Absolutely. This is really important. If I was looking at the number of participants in these meetings, fantastic. Please do try to look at the code, which is now shown on the top of the screen. It's 59495026. And we'll give you a few seconds to make sure that you have the time and space to log in to Mentimeter. Okay, I can see some little hands happening. Therefore, should we move to the first question? For those of you who may be not quite yet in Mentimeter, please remember the Mentimeter. You can go to menti.com, and if you use the code 59495026, the first question is, if you could choose one word to describe social work, what would it be? And I can see already some answers. Fantastic, everyone. Like Katie mentioned and Jonathan mentioned, absolutely this is opportunity for us to have your information, your views, your contributions to all of this campaign, isn't it? The Change the Script campaign in 2025. I can see many of you absolutely look at rewarding, empowering, caring, challenging. Empowering seems to be the key word. Definitely that tells me that many of us in this room probably have gone for that word, voted for that word. Absolutely. It's really beautiful to see so many ideas coming through. I believe at least we have 86, 87 people, 88 now contribute, which is fantastic. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Misunderstood. I can see that as well. Something to bear in mind, isn't it? I think we really acknowledge that. Passion. What a beautiful word. For if it is to describe social, what that word will be. Challenging, empowering, rewarding, passion, care, caring, important. Right, thank you, everyone. Should we move to the next question, maybe? This is, to what extent do you think social workers are positively or negatively portrayed in the media? Therefore, please remember, the media could include TV, radio, print, and online news. And I can see many of you have amazing skills around Mentimeter. Really impressed by that. Wow. I'm going to give few seconds, absolutely, to make sure that everybody has the chance to contribute. I have no doubts that this is our individual experience and what we have observed, what we have seen probably recently in the last, 12 months or so on. For clearly the majority of us kind of have a perception of very negative or quite negative portrays of social workers in the media. Okay. I think now we have at least 100 people, 105 people contribute to this question. Thank you, everyone. Let's move to the third question. Thank you so much. In general, do you think society as a whole has a positive or negative perception of social workers? So the answer are positive, negative, mixed, neutral, or not sure. Thank you so much, everyone, for contributing to this. It's really important to us to have your input and engagement around this Change the Script campaign. I think it's really vital that we hear your views around how it feels for you, what is your experience, and definitely looks to me from the data on the screen that we still have that either mixed perceptions of social workers, in your view, the society currently holds, or negative. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for your contribution. We really appreciate that, and we're going to take that data. Now, this question, I'm going to ensure that you have a little bit more extra time because I can see lots of choices there. Therefore, what do you think will encourage people to have a more positive view of social workers, if anything? Therefore, we have lots of choices here, and I'm going to let you read them and maybe choose those ones you feel are the most accurate. What do you think will encourage people to have a more positive view of social workers? And I think this is going to inform our campaign, isn't it, Katie and Jonathan? This is going to help us make the next steps around the Change the Script campaign, part 2, I call it, in 2025, when I talk about it. And I want social workers, wherever I've been talking and presenting and meeting even student social workers, I've been already mentioning this happening and taking place already. 47. For positive stories of people that social workers have supported, therefore seems to be absolutely one of the most popular ones. 77. 79. More positive portraits of social work in the media. For quite lots of ideas, absolutely there. And I think it looks to me quite a combination, isn't it, Katie and Jonathan, of all of those kind of ideas. And we also have an interesting one. Nothing will encourage people to have a more positive view of social workers. More positive portraits, okay. We have at least 107 people have managed to share their views. And therefore, I think we have 99, or in fact 100, positive stories of people that social workers have supported. Seems to be the one most voted, followed by more positive portrait of social workers in the media. And absolutely, we have also hearing about the experience of social workers themselves and more information about the education training undertaken to become a social worker. Absolutely, also because it's really intense and indicates the skills and knowledge, isn't it? Social workers are developing throughout their training in the initial training before they are able to join the register. I believe it seems to me that everybody's voted. Thank you so much, everyone, for contributing to the Mentimeter. Really, really appreciating this. I think I'm going to bring Katie back.
Yeah, thank you. I really do appreciate everyone's input there to that and validates some things and gives us pause for thought for others, which is exactly the point. And as you can see from that last bit, there's definitely that different takes on what the next step should be, and so there's lots for us to continue to consider. I love the words of vital, empowering, supporting, compassionate, but challenging as well. I think that's spot on. Also love the reflections on how is it viewed by society, negative or mixed. I think like I'm in a bit of the mixed camp. I don't think we're quite where we were, and I think it's important to acknowledge that as well. But we're definitely on a journey to achieving more positive reflections. All that's left to say for me is do look out for the activities to help us to reframe social work and change the script. You can support the reframing guide. Keep an eye on our channels late April, I think I'm right in saying, Jonathan. Yeah, I'm getting nods. That's good. So late April, and please do use them. And if it's something you feel resonates, please do get behind that. The videos will be live then as well. Keep an eye on our channels because we'll be continuing to take you behind the scenes on this. We'll share some of those visuals and footage that we've got for phase 2. And then finally, just really interested in your own reflections of any local campaigns and good examples as well. So how are you changing the script locally? And please do continue to share them. We often get these on our social media channels. But again, if you want to reach out to me and Jonathan, really happy to have a chat on that as well. And let's change the script on social work for good. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, everyone, contributing to the session, contributing to the Mentimeter. Really, really appreciate that. Please join the conversation. Social Work Week continues this week. We have posted in the chat a survey and a feedback form. Please do complete that form. It really supports us to develop our next steps and also taking on board more ideas and your creative ideas, what we should do next, what we can do more. And we are looking forward to see you tomorrow. We still have 4 events tomorrow. And thank you, everyone, once again for joining us tonight.